day 671 of the Trump administration. And on this Thanksgiving Eve in the new normal, our president today gave thanks to Saudi Arabia and was publicly rebuked by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for his attack on the federal bench. Today, Chief Justice John Roberts took the very rare step of speaking up publicly to discount the words of the president. This got its start yesterday after a federal trial judge in San Francisco ruled against the president's immigration and asylum policy. The president used that moment to return to a favorite hobby horse of his, criticizing the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals headquartered in California.
Well, you go to the Ninth Circuit and it's a disgrace, and I'm going to put in a major complaint. Because you cannot win, if you're us, a case in the Ninth Circuit. Every case that gets filed in the Ninth Circuit, we get beaten, and then we end up having to go to the Supreme Court, like the travel ban, and we won. The Ninth Circuit, we're going to have to look at that. This was an Obama judge, and I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like this anymore.
It is true that the federal judge in this case, John Tigar, was appointed by President Obama. It is also true that his ruling was not issued from the Ninth Circuit. But that, from the president, was all the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court needed to hear. When asked about it by the Associated Press, John Roberts responded today with this: "We do not have Obama judges or Trump judges, Bush judges or Clinton judges. What we have is an extraordinary group of dedicated judges doing their level best to do equal right to those appearing before them. That independent judiciary is something we should all be thankful for." A few hours later, Trump fired back, and we quote, "Sorry, Chief Justice Roberts, but you do indeed have Obama judges, and they have a much different point of view than the people who are charged with the safety of our country. It would be great if the Ninth Circuit was indeed an independent judiciary, but if it is, why are so many opposing view on border and safety cases filed there, and why are a vast number of those cases overturned? Please study the numbers. They are shocking. We need protection and security. These rulings are making our country unsafe, very dangerous, and unwise." The president continued to berate Roberts on Twitter, adding, quote, "Judicial activism by people who know nothing about security and the safety of our citizens is putting our country in great danger," followed by 79% of these decisions have been overturned in the Ninth Circuit. The U.S. courts for the Ninth Circuit covers the far western part of our nation. They are not the circuit with the most overturned decisions. Several others make the list before them. This is not the president's first criticism of federal judges or the sitting Chief Justice of the United States.
The courts are not helping us, I have to be honest with you. It's ridiculous. Somebody said I should not criticize judges. Okay, I'll criticize judges.
I have had horrible rulings. I've been treated very unfairly by this judge. Now, this judge is of Mexican heritage. I'm building a wall. Justice Roberts gave us Obamacare. Might as well be called Roberts Care. That judge has been a disaster in terms of everything we stand for.
This back and forth between the titular heads of two of our branches of government comes as the Mueller investigation into this administration is entering, as we like to say, a critical phase. More indictments are expected, and then there is the possibility that Mueller could subpoena Trump to answer questions related to obstruction. That could spark a giant legal battle that could very well end up, see how this works, before John Roberts and the other 8 justices of the Supreme Court. The nation also woke up to headlines like these after the president yesterday defended Saudi Arabia in the murder and dismemberment of Washington Post journalist and U.S. resident Jamal Khashoggi. This morning, the president followed with this: "Oil prices getting lower, great, like a big tax cut for America and the world. Enjoy. $54 was just $82. Thank you to Saudi Arabia, but let's go lower." Well, let's go lower ourselves, and with that, back to our lead story. We start off tonight with the president's criticism of federal judges and this rare rebuke by the Chief Justice. We are so fortunate to be joined tonight by a lawyer who has argued 37 cases before the Roberts Court, Attorney Neal Katyal was formerly the government's top lawyer before the court as acting Solicitor General under the Obama presidency. He is now a professor of law at Georgetown University. He's been kind enough on Thanksgiving Eve to join us by telephone. And, Counselor, what do you fear is going on here?
Well, happy Thanksgiving, Brian. It's a pleasure to be with you again. And what I fear is going on, unfortunately, is this is not actually about the Ninth Circuit. Look, I mean, President Trump has criticized John Roberts and criticized other judges all the time, and your setup had some of that. But, you know, he tweeted, I just retweeted this on Twitter, on my Twitter account, but he said, quote, "Congratulations to John Roberts for making Americans hate the Supreme Court because of his BS," end quote. So, you know, Trump has a long history of that. We don't have as a history of a president attacking the motivations of judges. That's something new and different. And I think what's going on here is it's not about the Ninth Circuit. It's really about this president's modus operandi, which is to criticize any check and balance on him. We've seen it with the media repeatedly, you know, the Acosta case, but also all sorts of things. We've seen it with the Justice Department and FBI, where he's actually fired the heads of those because they weren't sufficiently doing his bidding and the like. And this is just of a piece with that.
While I can't believe we're talking this way, here we are in 2018. Your argument has been taken already today to its logical conclusion that in the hypothetical, a case called U.S. v. Trump comes before the Supreme Court. Your point is, I presume, that the president will have soiled the notion of Supreme Court justices, the federal bench, as all agents of politics?
Exactly. So, you know, look, anyone who practices before the court knows these justices are going to make the decisions they make based on the law, but they're not going to do it based on their antipathy towards a particular person. So no matter how much Donald Trump says all this stuff, I don't think it's going to matter to the ultimate decision. But the president has taken so many ridiculous legal positions, it's a fair bet that this Supreme Court is going to say no to him on some things. And what I think President Trump is doing right now is laying the groundwork for an attack on the institution of the Supreme Court, an attack on the institution of an independent judiciary. And so when he loses, he'll be able to say, oh, it's just those biased judges. They were upset with what I said, what I tweeted. They were upset politically. Who knows? But, you know, that's the danger when you have something like this. And that's why presidents have really not crossed this red line before.
In our closing seconds with you, I don't want to take you into dangerous territory, but let's talk about his two appointments to the court, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. You know he considers them, quote, his guys. And yet, is it your view that if it comes to it, if they sit for a case involving the guy who just sent them on the Supreme Court, they will side with reason and perhaps the majority that the chief will want?
That's the tradition of the court. So, for example, Justice Kagan was put on the court by Obama, but in her first year, she voted to strike down a big piece of President Obama's Obamacare initiative. So that's the way judges normally operate. And we saw it best this week because who voted on the Acosta case to say, Trump, you're wrong, CNN and Acosta, you're absolutely right? It was a Trump-appointed judge. That's the way judges work. That's the way they always have worked. And what the president is doing is despicable and dangerous.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.